Good evening. I'm John Solberg. I'm head of communications for FX Networks and FX Productions. And on behalf of everyone at FX and our studio partners at Fox Television Studios and FXP, I want to thank you all for joining us for tonight's screening and panel discussion for our award-winning and hit acclaimed series, The Americans. We're very fortunate tonight. Our moderator for our panel is the esteemed TV critic of HitFix, Alan Sepinwall. Alan has been credited with changing the nature of the way television is reviewed. He regularly reviews and recaps up to 15 shows a week. He and his partner at HitFix, Dan Feinberg, have a weekly podcast called Firewall and Iceberg. And his book, The Revolution Was Televised, is the definitive chronicle of the new golden age of television. Of The Americans, Alan said, this is a fantastic conclusion to a fantastic season. It paid off in everything in a way that felt true to what had come before, and in a way that left me feeling a bit frayed at the nerves by the end of it. It'll be a long wait for season 3, but I can applaud 13 episodes as great as this. So, with that, it's my pleasure to introduce the season 2 finale of The Americans, entitled Echo. We hope you enjoy it.
Previously on The Americans.
He met with Kate. I saw him with her. Maybe they're just a step ahead of us. They're supposed to be taking care of him.
It's not you that I want. It's the scumbags who killed my friends.
Наши нелегалы сейчас пытаются достать информацию о радаропоглощающем материале. Центру сейчас нужно эхо.
Эхо?
Это компьютерная программа.
Наша цель — технологии стелс.
Again, we're really proud of this season, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this week, the 2 major television critics organizations announced their awards in the TCA Awards. The show was nominated for Outstanding Achievement in Drama, and Matthew Rhys was nominated for Individual Achievement in Drama. And for the Critics' Choice nominations, The Americans was nominated for Best Drama Series. Matthew Rhys was Best Actor, Keri Russell Best Actress, and Annette Mahandru for Supporting Actress. So we're really, really happy and proud of that honor. And now for the people who make the show and are responsible for it, we're going to start our panel discussion. And again, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the TV critic for HitFix, and I guess the king of all TV critics. Please welcome Alan Sepinwall.
Yeah. Thanks, John. How about the finale? That was pretty fantastic. We have some people from the cast and crew of The Americans. We're going to start with the show's composer, Nate Barr. Come on down. He plays FBI agent Stan Beeman. He made a very hard choice in this episode. Noah Emmerich. He has killed a lot of people in this season, and we're going to talk about every single one of them. As Philip Jennings, Matthew Rhys. She is still very much a true believer in Mother Russia as Elizabeth Jennings, Keri Russell. Very welcome. The show's creator and executive producer, Joe Weisberg. Sir. And executive producer, Joel Fields. Let's do this. Matthew.
Rough angle.
Yes.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
We're huge.
All right.
I'm afraid this is going to break.
So I want to start off talking, one of the big things that happens in this finale is that we finally find out that Jared killed his parents and his sister.
Wait, what?
Sorry, should have said spoiler alert for you guys. For the two of you, at what point did you figure out that this is where that story was going to go?
From the first moment we had that story, that was the story we wanted to tell. It felt like the most emotionally true story to us, and although we're always open to things changing over the course of the season, that's one that held.
And we were so upset. I mean, we really were. We were like, this is horrible. It was upset. Hopefully you were very upset when you saw it, and we were very upset when we thought about it.
We wanted to find another killer, but Jared did it.
That's tough. Now, did those of you in the cast, did you speculate? Were you wondering over the course of the season, or did you know, too, that this is where it was going?
We did not. I did not know.
I didn't know.
I didn't know.
Nate's always the last to find out. We actually had there was a really fun day where we, I think we walked into, was it your trailer, and we took Matthew in there and we said, we have some things to tell you. They're going to be a little
like any actor, both of us went, are we being fired?
We said, of course, worse.
Yes.
So what was your reaction when they told you that this is where things were going, both with Jared and also with Paige?
Shock.
Yeah.
Absolute shock.
Yeah, in the best way, because I hadn't seen it coming at all. So I was sort of had that same revelry that, would hope that the audience would feel the same way.
Because, I mean, that's one of a couple of different sort of stomach-churning points in the episode. Another is when we see what Stan wrote in the note that he gives to the KGB. Noah, was there any point at which you thought Stan was going to turn, or were you a true believer for Stan the whole time?
I'm a true believer. Although I still don't know what happens now. It's really hard for me sort of to separate from the character, but it's hard to imagine either outcome. So although we've seen Nina drive off in a car, the part of me as the actor still wonders, well, and these guys surprise me at every turn. So I don't know anything, so this is not a hint or any intimation. Maybe a hint for these guys, but I'm like, Nina, we haven't seen Nina on a plane or in Russia yet, so who knows what could happen.
But was there any point in the season where you were either worried or maybe lobbying them, saying, Stan can't turn on his country no matter how much he cares for this woman?
Oh yeah, always. I'm always lobbying to make my character the most heroic and noble.
Noah's he's the most confusing because he's sort of like, tell me what's going to happen. No, don't tell me. Tell me, don't tell me, stop. I'm never sure what you want to know.
Neither am I.
This season, the three of you and everyone else in the cast were really put through the ringer even more than in the first season. How much of that was the intention of the two of you going in, saying, all right, now we're really just going to take these fine actors and kick the crap out of them for a while emotionally?
I don't think we ever had that thought per se. It just seems to be the nature of the show. That's what happens to these poor guys.
I was saying, now that you put the idea in our head, though.
Sorry. But I mean, for Keri and Matthew, you're going through an awful lot, even more so this year than last year. Is that scary? Was it exciting? Is it challenging? How did you approach all of the very dark places you were both taken to?
No, you.
Yeah,
the sort of initial answer is yes, very challenging and very exciting. That after the first season, you sort of think, well, how are they going to top that? And then they do, and it gets darker and it gets more extreme and in different ways and different tangents, and it certainly keeps you on your emotional toes, and you're incredibly engaged. So there's no real negative to that.
And Keri?
Yeah, challenging, but exciting and interesting. Always interesting, and I just feel like it's been such an interesting show to work on. Difficult, but really, just I'm glad that it keeps me interested. I hope it keeps you interested.
Yeah.
But it's always been surprising in a good way.
I think striking a balance between, what the boys have done in striking a balance between the espionage element and the incredibly human element, and sort of finding where that lands, is a real sort of hats off to them. And they've done something which I think feels very real, and that's a testament to sort of succeeding in doing both.
Well, I'll just to take our hats off back to you guys. When you asked your question whether we made a conscious decision to put them through the ringer, we gave a joking response, and it wasn't the case. But over the course of the first season, what quickly became clear to us is that these were actors who could really do anything and who would surprise us with deeper and different interpretations of the words. And what that does is it takes limitations off us as we break story and we think about where the characters can go. So in that sense, they're to blame for being put through the ringer.
So, I mean, have there been times where the way in which they've played a scene has sort of taken a story or a character arc in a different direction as a result of you seeing, the work they were doing on the stage?
Not story or character arcs, but they take moments in different directions than anticipated, and that's always a pleasure to experience.
Well, I'll give you an example. I think my favorite thing in the whole season is what you just saw at the end, after they're talking to each other and you go back and forth between each of them looking at each other after that final dialogue. And it's not something we discussed or saw in our heads. We just wrote the dialogue. But for me, the favorite thing in the season is just visual of the two of them looking at each other and their expressions changing as they go through this It's weird to say this while looking at you, but look at you while I say it. Yeah, that's my favorite thing in the whole season. So.
Yeah.
But I wasn't in that.
but we were thinking about you when we were looking at each other.
The subtext
they read.
was
so powerful.
Yes.
In terms of things mysteries trying to be solved over the course of the season, Nina's loyalty, was at least somewhat up in the air, and Annette, I felt, played it really ambiguously. How did everyone on the panel feel her loyalties actually lay? Was she entirely against Stan? Was she sort of playing both sides, just trying to survive? Any theories?
I think Noah should.
You know how I feel.
Yeah, yes.
Totally in love with Stan.
Madly in love with Stan.
Why wouldn't she be?
That's how I play it.
It's really hard for me I actually didn't spend any time, honestly, thinking about that because it just would make my job more difficult. Stan certainly believes, I think, that there's real feelings there. So any venturing beyond that would only make my job that much more difficult. So I don't actually take the bird's eye view really on that particular relationship. It's too difficult for me.
I mean, do you actually try to avoid reading or watching the stuff at the Residentura, or?
Yeah, I don't. I hate that stuff.
So difficult to understand.
I always feel like it's going to be edited out anyway.
This'll never last.
No way. Fantasy.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. You have sort of the bifurcated nature of the show where half the KGB isn't seeing the other half of the KGB, and it's a big deal in this episode when Philip approaches Arkady. I mean, that's the first time you and that actor had worked together before, right?
Yeah. We joked several times that there should be a moment where Philip passes him and does a double take just to make sure that it is. And then I sort of do a little nod. Is it you? And then I threaten him. They didn't go for that.
One of the many notable changes this year is it was both a more violent season and it seemed also a more sexual season. One of the very first scenes of the season is Paige walks in on her parents performing an act that I'm not sure has been ever depicted on American television before. Where did that come from exactly?
A book.
We read about it.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things that you do when your television writer is sit in a room with 8 other people in pitch sexual positions. Strange job.
There was a lot of discussion that went into that particular position. What the moment called for was, on one level, something comedic.
Yeah.
On another level, something that spoke to what was happening in that family dynamic, but also something that could express where they were at in terms of their level of intimacy with one another. And the research showed that this was the appropriate way to play the scene.
All right, that sounds well and thoroughly justified.
We did take a lot of time with it.
Yep. Another notable sort of scene along those lines is when Elizabeth gets the very, very bad idea that she's going to role play and have Philip play Clark with her. First of all, what was it like, wearing the Clark wig with Keri as opposed to, in a scene with Martha? Did it feel wrong to you?
No, it didn't. It didn't feel wrong. That episode was a number of things, but it was psychologically, I thought it was incredibly interesting. What that take from a standpoint of a relationship where one person discovers a piece of information that's new to her and thinking that they know someone. Again, this is a show of, at times, great extremes, and landing the tone right that was difficult because, there is tendency for it to go in several directions. So, we were incredibly lucky with the director we had, Charlotte. Yes, was. I think got it spot on and set a very, very specific tone as to what that scene should be. And when we got to shooting it, there wasn't really any humor about because you realized that it was spiraling into a dark place quickly.
But that's one of my favorite. I know it's weird, and I know it's
Yes.
really pushing the limits. But it's one of my favorite episodes of the season for me, just because the relationship is so complicated and it gets so weird, and it's pushing the limits of how uncomfortable they are and how specific that relationship is. And I think that was really, I know it was extremely broad, not something everyone could relate to, but I think everyone can relate to that idea of not, finding out that your partner is different with somebody else and why are they like that, and not knowing it but wanting to know more about it. And I think that's when the show is the most interesting, when it's really about relationships and just a really complicated one.
Yeah, and it starts off in sort of this strange and funny place, and then it turns incredibly dark.
You're like, no, I don't want this.
Yes.
I want it. No, I don't want that.
Speaking of wigs, Keri, did you ever expect to be on another show where people were obsessing on your hair quite as much as they are here?
No.
Tell them about the wall in the makeup.
Oh, yeah. So we have many, many wigs on the show, and the Peg, our lovely hair woman, designer, has a wig that we call the Felicity wig because it is a big curly fro, and she kept wanting me to wear it, and I was like, I don't want to wear that wig. But we made every single person, including everyone sitting here, basically, try on the wig, and we have a big wall of everyone wearing the Felicity wig, including Jimmy Fallon now is wearing it as well. Yeah.
That's great. That has to be made public at some point.
Yeah.
Do either of you have a favorite wig or a sort of a frustrating wig?
My favorite wig, I've now named him Fernando as an alter ego. That he has he's sort of like the caretaker man, and he has a mustache and hair. And I have him coming from Spain, and he used to be a flamenco teacher. All this, and he has a very Spanish sort of sibilant S.
Fernando's a sexy guy. We like Fernando.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell him how he talks.
He talks like Buzz Lightyear when he got put on Spanish mode.
Yes.
That's what I got it.
Buenos tardes.
That's Fernando.
Yeah.
I enjoy him.
And Noah, do you or any of the other actors ever get wig envy, or you're happy to be left out of that
I
particular
most
area?
definitely have wig envy, actually. I'm always lobbying for Stan to wear a wig, even if it's just in private. But that would be a whole different direction for the character. But I do envy sort of the fun. I mean, look, we're actors, so clearly we like dressing up and putting on makeup and wigs. Whatever problem that may be, we can't really pretend we don't enjoy that. So watching Matthew and Keri, it's one of the fun things about great things about the roles are it's to play so many characters. And we do know that Stan has an undercover background, so clearly he's schooled in wig wearing. need be. But also, honestly, it is actually quite arduous. It's not really arduous in life, but it's a pain to wear a wig, especially, it takes a lot of work to put it on and to be anxious about it slipping and to glue it down and pin it in, and it can be very uncomfortable and under the lights and the heat. Sometimes I'm grateful when I see them in the chair for hours. I feel pretty good.
And Joel and Joe, it's really kind of remarkable. This was almost a running gag among the audience in the first season about the wigs and, how do they never come off? How has Martha not noticed? And you sort of, you open up the season and Philip kills a guy because the wig comes off. And the wigs became this very serious part of the show all of a sudden, and you turned it around on us.
I think part of it actually did come out of our response to some very legitimate questions about the wigs in the first season, and to some moments where we feel we screwed up, frankly, with the wigs in the first season, particularly that moment where the wig was just casually plucked off of Philip's head in the warehouse, and I think we wish we had stapled it on harder there. So we restapled
the guy who plucked it was another KGB
He was a professional.
operative, so he knew exactly where the weak spot was. That's how I justified it. He's like, oh, he knows where the button is.
But it was one of those things that provoked a discussion for us that turned into real story and real character stuff, to the point where I feel like the stuff with Martha, the reveal towards the end of the season, was less about delivering the end of the wig plot and more about saying something about what her character had known from the beginning.
Yeah, she's much smarter than we've perhaps pegged her for, despite falling for this very bad person.
That's right, and now she has a gun.
Yes. You bring a gun in the first act, it's going to go off at some point. The level of violence also went up. Philip killed an awful lot of people this year. Matthew, did you even keep track, or
No, it becomes a blur after a while.
But I know Elizabeth killed some people. Stan killed Bruce Dameron. There's no sense of competitiveness among you. I've got this many notches on my gun.
Well, we don't know each other.
Yes.
In that capacity.
No.
You've killed people? I thought you were in travel agent.
Yes. No, we're not. I think that should be the season 3, though. So the competitive kill rate sort of comes in between the two of them, or how many bullets. Yeah. I didn't use a bullet this time.
Well, one of the interesting turns of the season is Elizabeth has come back from the shooting, and she, in the first season, she's more of the badass of the two of them. She's the one you go to if you need the job done without remorse. And this season, she's kind of vulnerable. She's reluctant at times to do violence. She's also, at times, it seems reluctant to do sexual things with some of her assets. How did you try to approach that new level of vulnerability for her this year?
I liked that. I thought it was really interesting and made it just more complicated in those scenes. And it's not as fun to watch someone who's, for me anyway, when someone's perfect at everything, you're like, yeah, I know what that is. But it's more interesting to watch someone mess up and go, oh God, what are they doing? And that's what I loved about those earlier episodes, watching her off her game and stumble, and the idea that becoming more vulnerable makes you more vulnerable in this line of work that she's in, and how much it complicates things.
And one of the things I've always found fascinating about the show is the ways in which, when either Philip or Elizabeth is undercover, they start using it in a weird way as therapy. Like, Philip will deal with marital issues with Martha that he can't with Elizabeth, and sometimes when Elizabeth is meeting with assets, she will talk about things that she can't otherwise, and you get to show through these 6 layers of wigs and disguise and everything else what they're actually feeling.
It's really interesting, and it's such a gray, what's real and what's not, and I think that's kind of the fun, is not really, you get to kind of mess with it a little bit, right? It doesn't have to be so clear.
Now, Matthew, speaking of killing, Marshall Eagle, we get to the point. Philip has just killed too goddamn many people at this point. He can't deal with it anymore. And his solution, ironically, is he's maybe going to go kill the minister to deal with it. I mean, that's a very intense episode for you, and just all of this rage coming out and yelling at Paige about Jesus and tearing the Bible up. What was the experience of doing that one like for you?
It was a little intense. There were moments you sort of, the training I did at an early age is sort of sense memory, and I used a little bit of that. And then the scene with Paige I found very difficult because probably on the first take in the wide, I didn't tell Holly what I was going to do in order to try and get. I'm such an asshole. A reaction, and the reaction was, it shocked me because it shocked her, but it was very real, and that, you have those moments that just pulls you out of the scene where you're the actor going, oh no, this poor girl is now shaking in front of me, and then the other part of me going, yes, what a reaction, yeah, bingo, yeah, shake, girl.
Speaking of Holly, you guys gave her a lot to do this year. Often this is the kind of show that when you start dealing with the kid characters, the teenagers, that's when things go horribly awry, and instead everything with Paige and with Henry only made things more complicated and more interesting. How did you choose to approach it, and maybe how did you avoid those pitfalls that often tend to hit these kinds of shows?
I don't think we were ever concerned about that. We read a lot of stuff, and we read about where people have complained about other shows that the kids go off on their own arcs and it doesn't fit into the show. But for us, in this show, the family is so integrated. Whatever happens to the kids is such a part of the parents lying to the kids, and that's the whole story of the show. So we felt that any story we built around Holly or Kedrick was just going to naturally be part of everything that's happening to the family, and I think I think it's worked. I think it's worked.
Noah, Stan is kind of in a bad place for a lot of this season. He's screwed over his boss. He's making these other mistakes, all because of sort of his fixation on Nina. Did you get worried at any point that maybe he was going a little too off the rails?
I don't know if I was worried. I mean, I was depressed. He was in a painful place. I don't think I lost faith in Stan, but I did feel like he was getting the crap beaten out of him, which is great. But I would occasionally just drop by the writer's room and say, guys, what are you doing to me? Can you give me some sunlight, any light, just a piece of light?
You say, no, not today.
No, and they kept saying it's only going to get worse. And they were right. But that's wonderful material to engage with, So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
I mean, you guys couldn't have just done a whole episode set at the bachelor party on the Dude Ranch in Kentucky? No? Just to help them out?
Next season.
Yeah, season premiere.
All right. So I have one nit to pick with the episode that the crowd just watched, which is the Golden Earring song that's playing over the montage.
We love that song.
No, it's a great song. All right. Comes out in August of 1982. The episode is set in spring of 1982.
Wait, in the U.S., it came out in August.
I think it came out everywhere in August.
No, I think, didn't PJ say it came out?
What he said, we're ready for this nit.
Okay.
We're ready
to
go.
Please.
What we are told by our music supervisor is get ready for this, they were playing it live months before that.
Okay.
Wow. You see how good they are.
Yeah.
But actually, where we're particularly obsessive is where something's used as source.
Okay.
In this case, it really is more a piece of score, although it wasn't Nate's score in this case.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of a different standard, too.
Okay. Well, speaking of anachronistic music, in an earlier episode of the season, you feature a brand new song written by Nate and a guy by the name of Pete Townsend. You may have heard of him. How did that come about?
That was amazing. It was Joe and I and PJ Bloom, our music supervisor, spoke about some sort of cool collaboration to do. And so PJ, we came up with sort of our hit list of people we'd like and sent out the word. And Pete responded that he really loved the show and liked the music on the show too. And so he and I got on the phone. That was one of the greatest phone calls of my life. I live in Topanga Canyon, and the phone rang at like 6:30 in the morning, and it was Pete Townsend on the other line. Just absolutely surreal. And he was just an absolute gentleman. So we kind of talked about the way we wanted to work technically, and he said, this is the way I work when I work with Bono and Mick. And I was like, I got nothing.
Is that when you went, who?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, I wrote 2 tracks that were in the world of the music we created in season 1, but sort of felt a little bit more like a song for Pete to react to. And then I sent that over on our server. And 2 weeks later, I got his tracks back. And the most amazing thing was it was just me and my assistant sitting in the studio, and just to like turn up the volume on his tracks when he first sent them, and the first thing you hear is like the buzz of his amp in England, and it was just like shivers up the spine. It was just amazing. Wow. And so he wrote these incredible lyrics. We kind of knew roughly where we wanted to put it, but weren't quite sure. And then this scene came up in Yusuf, that episode, and they were amazing lyrics that fit. They were just played the irony of the scene in such a beautiful way.
And was the intention to, even though it was being written now, to come up with something that would sound as if it was the music of 1982?
Absolutely, a little bit. I think it was more like to ground it in the score of the Americans in terms of the instrumentation, and I knew Pete would then honor the part of it that needed to sort of sound like the 80s with his guitar playing and his vocal work. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Stan goes the entire season without a partner. I don't know how much that winds up contributing to his recklessness. I mean, Noah, what was it like sort of having to be more solo this year as opposed to?
Yeah, it's a lonely character, you know. He has great scene partners and great encounters with great actors in different scenes, but he is ultimately sort of on his own. He's so estranged from his wife and from his secret KGB lover, spy. There's no real ground home. I've said to Matthew and Keri both sort of on occasion, you guys are, I'm so jealous you have each other. Maybe I've just gone crazy and become Stan, but you know, they do. It's a team. Like it's a team, sort of. So my days are sort of. It's more journeyman character in some way because of the. I never know who I'm going to be with on a given day, and I do feel the absence of a partner.
Without spoiling too much about season 3, is that something you guys have talked about, or did this work out for you better? This setup.
I don't share the stage with anybody. I don't need a partner. Sorry, that was the other side of my brain.
It's what we talked about. I think it's an interesting idea that his partner was killed and to explore that period when he's alone afterwards, and we're thinking about what to do next. We haven't made up our minds yet.
Yep. Keri, you are not the most necessarily physically imposing person on this stage or on the show.
How dare you?
Give her a crowbar.
No, I was going to the crowbar scene. So there's a scene where Elizabeth is in the warehouse, dealing with this much larger man, but you put a crowbar in her hand and suddenly she is terrifying. How much is Keri Russell and how much is crowbar is what I'm asking.
I don't know.
Just in general, how do you approach these scenes where you are meant to be this incredibly potent, lethal, KGB killing machine?
Oh God. I think, luckily, I hope that the past, season 1 helped set that up. Yes, I hear what you're saying, and yes, I say that all the time. I'm like, it's only me, guys. I think I have the support of, the storylines from before, and you're living in this world. It's obviously not me showing up. And you just sort of believe what you're doing. I don't know. You're there in that story, and I think, luckily, you've seen that character do crazy stuff.
Yeah.
and so then you feel the threat of the violence.
And for both of you, having done now 2 seasons of this, do you feel more comfortable at sort of the stage combat of it all?
Yeah, a greater sense of confidence in our stunt doubles. certainly a willingness, or far more eager to go, I'm sure Chris will do this far better. In fact, he did my monologue yesterday beautifully. You think I lie?
The truth is they are out there doing a lot of the stunts. And you haven't lived until you've stood on a street corner in Gowanus, Brooklyn at 3 a.m. in the freezing cold and watched Keri knee a guest star in the nuts repeatedly. It's a great way to end a long week.
He was a dancer.
He was a dancer at the Moulin Rouge.
I'm like,
he
he's
was.
a dancer.
Yeah.
And what I liked about that scene is there's male and female Mossad agents, and she takes on the man and he takes on the woman.
He fought the girl.
You go the obvious way.
Yeah.
I'm not stupid. You take him, darling. I'll do this.
So this season on the show, this is the most functional, strange to use that word, that the Jennings marriage has ever been, in that they're actually attempting to treat it as a marriage. And then we get to the end of it and we find that they are on very different, pardon the pun, pages when it comes to their daughter. That's really terrible. I'm sorry. But they're in really different areas in terms of what they want to do with Paige. What's going to happen now?
Yeah.
We're not telling.
Okay.
Also, we don't know.
But to the extent that we do know, I mean, you're right. The first season very much explored the question of how do you find marriage and what is a real marriage and what is a fake marriage, what does it mean to be married. And in the second season, once Elizabeth gave Philip that come home at the end of the first season, the second season was more about them being intimate and connected and trying to make a real marriage work and not wanting to do the same thing again. One of the questions that's suggested at the end of this season is now, if you are in a real committed marriage where you love each other and you want to make it work, what happens when suddenly you have a conflict over something very, very fundamental, where your worldviews diverge? What gives, and how do you continue together, and can you continue together?
And I imagine the two of you, having already done 13 episodes with these characters last season, now having done this season where they were more intimate together, it was easier because you had that familiarity with one another from the work.
To a degree, although it was still, the second season was in its way sort of pioneering a new phase for the Jennings. So yes, there was familiarity of a certain degree from the first season, but it was a new stage. It was uncharted territory for them.
There's a point towards near the end of the season, I think in the episode with the Pete Townsend song, where Elizabeth is supposed to go and seduce Yusuf, and Philip decides he doesn't want that. Are we approaching an area where he's comfortable sleeping with Martha and other women, but he doesn't want his wife doing the same?
Well, yeah, I just want to say, I think it was interesting when what we were trying to get at in that episode was that it was not just his own sensitivities about her doing that, but him having picked up her discomfort about doing it. So I don't know that it should be seen through a sort of a chauvinistic bent of, I don't want her doing it, but I as the man can do it. I think it was more his growing sensitivity towards his wife, though, as with everything else, see it your own way. But
yeah, in the prior episode, there was that exchange between them where he says to her, it's easier for you.
Yeah.
And she says that what she does is not easy.
Yeah.
And I think we were trying to follow up on that.
All right, I have some more questions, but I'm sure you folks in the audience have them as well. So if anyone has one, do we have a mic, John? Or? There are mics in the aisles. Okay, there are mics in the aisles, so if people want to get up there and there, we will take some audience questions.
They stayed.
They stayed.
The drove. Your parents just left.
With the Stan character, is that twitch like you? Do you have that twitch normally, or you just have it as an actor in this show?
Yes.
So that's part of you not being an actor? The twitch?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll do the one over here.
one question. The comment is for Nate Barr. Last week, the Academy had the score concert, and it was really great to see your music being played by musicians.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I was just wondering, besides the wigs, is there much room or time for any levity or joking, practical joking during shooting day with the, it's such a heavy, what you do is so heavy?
I mean, it's a really good group. We love our crew very much. We laugh, but to be completely honest, our schedule is really tight. I mean, with the amount of stunts and, it's a big show to shoot in 7 days, and I feel like it is so fast-paced. I feel like we barely make it every episode, and
so the only thing to do is joke.
So there's not a lot of stopping for even 10 minutes to do a joke. It's kind of just like go, 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 get this done, which I think is really helped by our DP, who really saves us a lot of time. But we all like each other, and it's light at times when you're killing people.
Right over there.
Yeah, this is mostly for the, I guess, producer, writers. But so a show like you do has, I would imagine, a lot of, as you can imagine, complex social, political implications on an international scale. Do you consider these, or is this a factor? Do you think about these things when you design or create the show in terms of, I guess on the downside, it can increase the tension, right? The polarity between nations, right? To bring this all up. But on the positive side, it's exploring and opening up, things that we don't normally see and the real human aspect of what's happening. Do you ever think about or have an interest in those type of considerations?
I'll just say, I just keep waiting for Putin to weigh in. I really do. I wander the streets thinking, when is that guy going to watch the show and say something about it? I'm now, after 2 seasons, starting to get angry about it. I'm like insulted that none of his advisors, nobody's brought it to him and said, you got to watch this show.
He has watched it. He thinks it's one of the funniest things.
What do you think inspired him to go into the Ukraine in the first place? Sorry.
Actually, there's not going to be anything better than the joke answer to that question. But the boring, serious answer to that question is we do talk about those things a lot. I don't think we pretend that we could have any impact on the world in the sense that Putin's going to watch the show and suddenly there will be a change of course in world events. But what we talk about is what you're talking about, which is exposing the human relations and the dynamics of people in these bureaucracies and in these organizations. And I think part of the genius of what Joe created in this show is that the international relations serve as allegories for the small relationships between the people, and that the relationships between the people can sometimes be allegories for the relations between the countries, and that's a fun and interesting arena to play in.
Over there.
You really do consider it, so thank you.
Good evening. This TV series arrived, and there is not many TV shows that probably anybody turning their TVs for, and it's very believable plot twists. Thanks to whomever wrote this, besides Mr. Fields in the history. It's ingenious score. Thanks to Mr. Barr, whose middle name gotta be genius. Boku wa shiteiru no gaki ijou anata wa insou suru no gaki zutto takusan. I'll translate. You probably know more like Japanese style instruments and probably even speak more Japanese than I do, but I was very curious to ask you, because you're like a shy, humble guy here sitting like on the very edge, and nobody gives you enough credit for all those instruments you brought into the score, which is it's mind-boggling if you play like instruments like glass harmonica and koto and shikutachi and all those things. I would like to talk at length about it, but we don't have time about it. And all those things and kind of like righteous runs by you, Keri, and you, Matthew, when you actually shoot all these episodes with your kids and the dialogues you having about they get children when they're young, they indoctrinate them, like talking about the church, or when you're saying about like Somoza in Nicaragua. I watched every episode on this season, and as opposed to the first season, which I majorly missed, and I was so glad that I caught up with the last 2 episodes before that. Before I proceed with accolades, I can tell you that they probably cut out about 10 minutes out of this beautiful episode, and every second of every episode on the show counts, because there's so much weight and everything like put into every thought. Like Mr. Fields was talking earlier, like he wishes Mr. Putin sees it and all the people see it. But it's great because there's a lot of things that weigh in. And I was going to ask you, when you talk about those things like they indoctrinate children, or you don't want them to be like us when you have this latest dialogue in this episode about talking about age. Do you really think about those things? Do you transcend into some higher plane about this, or it's a pure acting? It's like more like a research and pure acting, and just it doesn't really bother you one way or another, like the previous question.
Is anybody?
Working. Just to pick up on the line that you quoted, I think very often throughout every episode, so much of the dialogue is imbued with double and triple meaning that you can start to sort of spiral sometimes as an actor as to you over imbue certain lines, and certain lines stand out in that way. So this sort of, I know I keep harking on about sort of landing the tone, but we're incredibly lucky to have such dialogue to play with. But when it's laced so incredibly with double meanings, triple meanings, and the like, then I'm not quite sure what I'm trying to say. Thank you, Jen.
All right, we've got a few more minutes. Let's go over there.
Even though this is a period piece, it doesn't quite feel like it. The 80s is more so a background, and I mean, the awareness of the 80s is quite subtle. So I'm wondering, what is the collaboration between the costume designer and the production designer as far as making it, oh, by the way, this is in the 80s, and not throwing the 80s in our face like most TV shows?
I mean, that was a great moment very early on in the show when our costume designer really came to us and said, more or less what you just said. Let's not throw the 80s in their faces, because that's not what the 80s really looked like. A lot of presentations you see of it, everything's big shoulder pads because it's just exaggerated. Let's do it like it really was. And we immediately said, oh, that's it. Let's go with that. And I think we got something much more real.
And less distracting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big deal when in an episode this season Elizabeth is basically dressed like Crystal from Dynasty, because the rest of the time she doesn't look like that. Yeah. So over here.
Hi. I agree with Noah that I'm very glad that Beeman did not end up betraying his country, but I wonder, is it a possibility that, based on some of the conversations that Oleg had with his superior about whether they would send Nina back regardless of what happened, since we never really exactly see when he makes the drop what is on there, did our Katie, I think, is the chief resident, right? Did he possibly fake that piece of evidence, and he really did, in fact, leave something, and they sent her back regardless? And then when you're waiting...
Yes, maybe. That's
this is not the first time I've heard this.
Are you available in mid-July?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it is.
Waiting in the car to possibly go save her? Because I thought you were going to turn on they cut right before, but I thought maybe you were going to follow them, and then...
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah, he pitched that.
But what would you do? Yeah, I think it's all things are possible. That's what's so exciting about waiting for the next script. In our case, and for you guys waiting for the next episode. Hopefully, like we actually share on a really true level your hopeful anticipation of what's coming next. We don't know. You tell me.
All we know is that Nina is in a car driving away from the embassy.
Yeah.
Well, that's all you know.
All right, over there.
I have a question for Joel, and I think your answer is going to be continue to watch the show, but I have to ask it anyway. I feel like there's got to be more to the story as to why Israel would give up such a strategic asset like the scientists to a country that's basically an enemy.
Well, it was all those refuseniks that came out. It wasn't just to get their agent back. They got a slew of people released that night.
Yeah, I know that, but they're still giving up somebody that has a very high value. There's nothing more to that story?
Well, we'll see. You should keep watching the show.
Walked into that one. Right, over there.
Hi. A couple of quick filmic questions in the last episode. Reagan was almost monstrously huge on my screen at home. Why the choice of using Lenin versus Brezhnev? And also, what was that about when Matthew's character was talking to those people with the map before he got picked up by the army guy? What was that about? Husband and wife were pointing at a map or something?
Oh, that's a tradecraft question.
You mean when is that outside the donut shop? It was really just these are two people and have some way that they're doing something that two tourists would be doing, so nobody in the world would look twice or have any reason to think there's anything suspicious here. So two people in a car outside a donut shop, if they're looking at a map, that's A, totally unsuspicious, and B, it gives Philip a reason to go over to them. That's also completely unsuspicious. So literally, if a cop were a block away and saw the whole thing, he wouldn't even think twice. I mean, that was the reason.
Lenin versus Brezhnev on the residential wall.
I think that's like asking why George Washington and not
Exactly,
the latest president.
Yeah.
Right.
There are some pictures of Brezhnev around, I'm sure, but not a giant mural.
To take Noah's statement, anything's possible. I was amazed to find Derek Luke's character in this series. And I wondered if you could describe for us a little bit how that came about. That's what I'm talking about.
The what?
Dimensionality. In other words, it's not Russia versus the United States. There are other countries on this planet, so to speak, and there are other people. And I was delighted that you brought that into it.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, the genesis of that character, I think, started in our earliest conversations about Elizabeth's past and what relationships she might have had and where she might have had a real connection. And it also started in something practical, because you had been talking early on about the need for a surveillance team and how they might have built that over the years, and those things converged in that character. And what was kind of a really interesting dynamic to watch play out between these two early on as they came together. Yeah.
Right, over there.
Yes, first of all, I just want to say I really love the show, and your actors are all just fantastic across the board, so thank you so much for that. And secondly, this is a little bit of a pointed question, but do you guys have any plans to sort of integrate a more diverse cast moving forward? And I recognize that there's a bit of a challenge, granted the historical content, and we're dealing with, the KGB, not much diversity there, but yeah.
We are thinking about it, and we do face that challenge, and we are thinking about ways to do it, I think would be the best answer I can give. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It is a challenge. It's easier in other shows, in other contexts to address the diversity question, and in this case, we often find ourselves looking at scripts and saying, it doesn't feel real, that doesn't feel real, that doesn't feel real. But it is something we talk about.
Over there.
Hi. I like all the layers that all the actors have to play about different layers of deception with the people they're married to, their next door neighbors, etc. What I really liked in the first season was the proximity of Stan and the couple being next to each other and actually being in each other's houses and each other's living rooms, and there was a sense of, don't say this to this person, don't say that to that person. And in the second season, it seemed that the proximity was actually Paige within the house getting closer to figuring out what's going on with her own parents, or at least questioning it. So I'm wondering, in the third season, is Stan going to come back into more sort of close proximity to add that immediate layer of sort of tension and immediacy to who they're deceiving?
Yeah, I'm tired of being
Yeah, it's like, what happened to the caviar scene? We miss you guys having caviar, and everybody's stopping by. I mean, we're just going to blame
caviar.
them. Why didn't you come by more?
They changed the locks.
You guys played hockey.
I was gonna go back to the other answer. You should keep watching the show.
No, and if Stan gets a ColecoVision, then Henry will come over all the time. That solves all the problems. Over there?
I think this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship.
I love the show. I think you guys all do a fabulous job, from the writers, producers, actors. And my question is for Matthew and Keri. When you take on like the cover for an asset, do you give them a little bit of a backstory? I mean, obviously Clark is, because I watched an episode where Keri's character starts talking about someone attacking her, and I remember that from the first season is in her training in Russia, that one of her trainers took advantage of her and attacked her. And that was exactly, I mean, I felt that. I was like, wow, she took that straight from her real, character's background. So when you guys have assets, do you kind of give that, because you do a good job of like being a whole different person. And as an actor, it's I love watching it.
So sorry, what was the question exactly?
Each every time you take on a different cover for an asset, do you give them like a little bit of a backstory as an actor? Do you kind of layer because it comes across that way?
You have a really good answer, which I agree with, which is about just being as real, like as truthful.
Oh,
as
yes.
possible.
Yeah.
Not going, like being someone with a hunchback.
I learned that in Hollywood. Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to lie, stay close to the truth. But it sort of is true. I mean, I think in those moments, the great temptation, especially, sometimes with those characters a little more extreme, is that you want to sort of a hunchback and an eye patch and a parrot, and then you have to sort of calm down and sort of, you have to convince, not only the person in front of you, but the audience, but you keep it specific and simple, that you have to convince the person in front of you. Therefore, the truth should only be one, I think, should be one, the deception should be one click from the truth. And the simpler you keep it, I think, in a life or death situation, the better it is than sort of spiraling.
The more you can tell the truth, it's probably the better, for the other person. Yeah.
All right, I
It's
believe
the concise version.
All right, I think this is going to be the last question from over there.
Hi. Hi, I just have to ask this question because of my boyfriend who told me I needed to be here tonight.
Very good.
But we both, we're like, we got into it this year, and we call it our crack because we go home and we watch like 3-4 at a time at the commercials. So we're very much into the show, but we were intrigued, how long had you had this idea before you did it? Like how long was it in the can, so to speak? And who was, we call him like your anchor person, who you got first before the rest of the cast came together? Just very curious.
Well, I got the idea when my phone rang, and somebody said, after all those Russian spies were arrested in 2010, and the two heads of DreamWorks Television said, "Do you want to do a show based on this?" And I said, yes.
That's a great idea.
Eureka.
The light bulb went off at the exact moment they said it. I don't know. I think Keri.
Oh. Same time next week?
All right, thank you.
You've been a great audience.
We can see everybody.
I think Keri maybe was the first person in the cast, maybe. But I'm not positive about that, but I think you were. Now you're the anchor. You just became the anchor.
Yes!
Keri's the anchor.
You're the Ron Burgundy of the espionage world.
The anchor lifting us up.
There you go.
All All right, well, before any other of the power in the building goes out, thank you very much. Let's have a big hand for the cast and crew of The Americans.
For breaking entertainment news and more, follow @HitFix on Twitter or visit hitfix.com.